And I'm also the president of the entrepreneurship club on campus called Founders. So if you're interested in entrepreneurship, definitely check us out. Maybe we can just go down the line and everyone introduce themselves, maybe give a little bit of backstory about themselves and the company.
All right, I'll start. Okay. Well, okay, so I'll start. So I'm Kevin Petrovic. So I am one of the co-founders of FlightCar, which is a peer-to-peer car sharing community to operate at airports. So what that means basically is if you own a car and you're traveling, you park it with us for free. While you're gone, we rent it out to other people. So for the car owner, you get free parking for your whole trip. You can make some money depending on what kind of car you have and how far it's driven. We wash and clean the car, and of course it's fully insured too, like every other sharing economy company in the universe. If you're renting a car, it's just a cheaper price usually than with a standard rental car company. So we've been operating for about, let's say, a year and a half now. We've been around for 2.5 years. Based in San Francisco at the moment. We've got 3 locations, San Francisco, LA, and Boston. Just opened a 4th in Seattle yesterday. So really cool. We raised $20 million plus in funding so far. So it's been awesome.
Hello, my name is Alex Polvi. I'm the CEO of CoreOS. CoreOS is my second time through Y-Combinator. My first Y-Combinator company was called CloudKick. It built cloud server monitoring management tools. We were acquired by Rackspace Hosting in 2010 for $40 million. We had raised 2.75 in funding. And then CoreOS, we are currently at 20 people, and we've raised $8 million from Kleiner Perkins and Sequoia Capital.
My name is Chris Grier. So this is my first startup. It's called Databricks. I'm not one of the co-founders. I'm just an employee there. I'm a software engineer at Databricks. Databricks makes data science tools. We try to make data science easy. And so this is kind of a platform for data scientists to use. Big companies is kind of the target audience for this stuff. People who have a lot of data, want to do analytics, but kind of are having trouble with the current tool sets that are out there. Lots of different problems all over the space in this area right now. So we don't do support. We're actually just building tools. So it's a lot of fun, a lot of software engineering problems, a lot of big data problems, that kind of stuff. So I have a little bit different background. I haven't done a startup before this. I just joined about 3 months ago. Before that, I was an academic. So yeah.
A good academic. My name is David Albrecht. I graduated from here in 2009. Really happy to be back. A few years after college, I did a startup called Wishery. We went through AngelPad, raised some money. After about a year and a half, got a pretty compelling acquisition offer, so we ended up taking that. I stuck around at the acquirer for a while, wasn't very happy there, so I ended up going over to another company called Criticism, which is where I work now. I'm also an employee there. Criticism is a company that makes a performance toolkit for mobile apps. So what that means is if you're going to ship a mobile app out to the world, typically you want to know how it's performing, like whether it's having unhandled exceptions or crashing, how the network services are doing, what carriers and operating systems your users are using, that kind of stuff. So we know that we've been installed on 1 billion app installation instances. We're not exactly sure how many phones that translates to, but we think it's probably roughly 1 to 200 million, so quite a lot. I've worked on infrastructure a lot there, as well as distributed systems development. So I'll actually be speaking later today at 4 o'clock about some of the lessons I learned transitioning from like a purely software engineering role more into an operations and that sort of stuff, but I'm happy to be here, so.
Thanks. Just one more quick announcement for everyone. So what we'll do is, I have a couple of questions. I'll ask those at the beginning, just kind of to get everyone warmed up. And then if you have a question, I'll open up later. And then it's probably best if you just ask the question, I'll call on you, and then I'll repeat it for everyone so we can hear it with the mic. And that way I don't have to run up and get your question. But cool, to start off, so what's the best thing about working at a startup? We can go down the line, or if you have something to add, you can say it, or.
Sure. So, I mean, I think fundamentally it's your own company, right? So you determine your success, your failure, if that's the case. You can basically do what you want, but I think the best part is that it's such a small company that every input you put in has a direct output. You can see exactly the result of what you do. You can see if it works, if it doesn't. In a large company, you can work for years and not see any results. So I think it's more rewarding.
I'd just say it's pretty, I don't know, it's just pretty fun. I mean, like, you get to work on the technology you think is interesting with a group of people that you recruit, and if it works out, it's a meaningful, the whole goal is to build a meaningful business here, and any meaningful business has value. So it's to be able to do those three things, it's just kind of fun. I don't know what else to actually do.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely echo both of those guys' sentiments here. I think, even just joining a startup, even if you're not starting your own, there's a lot of really fun benefits to get in early on. It's not just about having huge impact in the way the company goes is a lot of fun. You also get to pick the tools you work with. You get to set the processes for the future. When do you have meetings? What are those meetings about? Like, how do you coordinate software development? Like, the whole process doesn't exist yet, and so going to a startup, you get to set the future and decide how the processes are going to be for the next 10 whatever years, and I think that's a lot of fun. It also makes it really easy to have a lot of things to play with. I mean, you're going through the startups are going through these phases where you haven't picked the software platform, or you haven't picked a particular technology or settled on a particular thing, and you get to do that, and you get to play with all of the options. You get to spend weeks just kind of evaluating and looking at kind of what's out there, looking at what other startups you might want to use or be involved with, and that's kind of a really fun aspect of work, I think.
So I've had a bit of time to think about this, so thoughts have crystallized a bit. But I have a bit of a unique perspective on this, having been both a founder and an employee for various businesses. So one thing I will say is that being a founder can be very stressful. When the company is going well, you'll be very happy. When things aren't going well, you'll be very, very stressful, and it will consume your life. So I think it's important to realize that there can be a downside too. But as far as being there and working, sorry, I'm blanking. I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
All right, next question. So what's your advice for students who want to start their own company? I'm sure you maybe get asked that question a lot.
Are we gonna do that?
Well, I just did a talk on that, so why don't we go in the other direction now?
Yeah, I would say don't be in a hurry. I think there's this meme circulating that if you don't start a company in your 20s that you're a huge failure, but that's actually not the case. In fact, I would love, as I think a lot of other people would in the Bay Area, to see startups that are a little more long-term in their orientation, people that are waiting 4, 5, 6 years to do something that's really important and material. Another thing too that I'm seeing recently is that I think there's a lot more emphasis on domain expertise and domain knowledge that's starting to become, it feels like over the last few years, there's been this kind of shift in the thinking in San Francisco, whereas in the past there was a lot of emphasis on doing stuff that'll grow really fast quickly. Now I think that, and I'd love to hear your guys' opinions on this as well, but I feel that there's a bit more of an emphasis on being tied to an industry, maybe that's energy or healthcare or something like that, and looking at things that are a little further out. So I would say, like, learn an industry really well. And stick with it for a while, because I think you'll have insight into the problems in a way that somebody who has been a software engineer their entire life or been in a different line of work wouldn't.
So I'm going to go the easy route, and I think if you're interested in doing a startup, you should do it. Right now is a pretty good time. There's a lot of interest in investment in startups. There's a lot of opportunity for all kinds of different technology-related startups, and it's a good time. This is a good time to do it. That being said, it helps a lot to have some experience. It's hard to come right out of college and do a startup. It's not impossible, but it's hard. And having a little experience about what is the right way to develop and distribute and deploy code. You might not have a class on that here, and if you don't, then it might help to do an internship where you get to kind of feel this out and see what maybe even a big company like Google is doing. You're not going to adopt that strategy as a startup. You're not going to run right into that millions and millions of lines of code problem. But it gives you some perspective and kind of gets you going. And but absolutely do a startup. I mean, it's a good time.
Yeah, I'd just say one thing you have to do, domain expertise, and this, I think really what that boils down to is having an advantage on something. You have to have an advantage, in some way. Otherwise, you're just part of the noise. And so if you're like, let's say, for instance, if you're a really good programmer and all your friends are coming to you about something, maybe you're really good at graphics, or for me it was server stuff, like having the advantage in some way, like something where you're a little bit better. Another way would be like team building, or just like if you're a project leader, like always pull a group together or help get stuff done. That's another sort of, I think, advantage in a way. And anyway, I just think the point is, like, if you're going to start it now, you have to have some advantage, and often it's kind of hard as a student to have an advantage on anything if you don't have any experience with anything. And that expresses itself most often in domain expertise, I think, like having some sort of domain expertise. But I don't think it's impossible to have domain expertise as a student. It just, the number of things to be a domain expert in are limited.
All good points. I think that I think you're all definitely right that the Bay Area is certainly targeting toward more sort of big problem type issues. Healthcare, energy, education, climate change, all big sort of things. Even that I've heard, for instance, out of Y-Combinator, that they're now focusing on companies that are targeting these big ideas, as opposed to some random app that does whatever. I suppose my perspective to the question might be a little bit unique, because I came straight out of high school, actually, and started my company. So these guys are telling you might want to do an internship. I sort of didn't do that. And I think it is possible, because I think if you have gaps in your knowledge, you can hire in the right people and build the right team to overcome that. I think it is very hard, though. I think that one of the most important things that I would look at, certainly if you're interested in doing a startup, I think it certainly is a great time, and I certainly think it's an awesome opportunity. But I would just urge everybody to echo what I was talking about, at 11, that you have to, when you're coming up with an idea, it can't sort of be like, it can't be marginally better. It can't be slightly better. It can't be 10% better. It has to be twice as good or 10 times as good as the next best thing, as the thing you're replacing. Because otherwise, I don't think you're going to get a lot of sort of traction and uptake.
Cool. So a lot of one kind of theme in answers was experience. So looking back on your own experience, what's kind of one thing that you did, or maybe a multitude of things that you did, that has benefited you the most in your current role?
And that's easy for me. When I was an undergrad, I went to Oregon State, go Beavs. We had a big open source kind of culture there. The first 25 million downloads of Firefox were served from the basement of our administrative building. And so there's this big open source thing there, and I got involved with this student thing where we were running lots of servers, and that just sort of set my whole career path up. And it was like a job that did that. That led to working at Mozilla. It led to working at Google. It led to starting CloudKick and Rackspace and all this stuff. So I would just say, like, getting experience as an undergrad for me it was exactly what did it.
Yeah, I mean, so some interesting things that you probably wouldn't expect to hear, but like organizational and kind of management skills, you can get them here, and you can find those things at school and learn how to do it. Like the people who are running this conference, for example, have organizational leadership skills. They know how to make people do things, get people involved, like do all that kind of stuff. And those kinds of skills are especially useful at startups, especially as you're hiring more and more and more. I mean, you start off with just a few people, but pretty soon you're 20 people, 30 people, 100 people, and those kinds of things start to matter even more. So having those kinds of skills is a really useful thing, and you can absolutely get that on campus, get that experience here.
Yeah, so there's clearly a little bit of a delay. But before this startup, yeah, I mean, I did something else too. I ran with the co-founder actually that started this with me. I ran a nonprofit and also a side business with some family members. Both experiences were really good at sort of preparing me for what this would require and what this would lead to. This is certainly a different level in terms of complexity and involvement, but just. I think that understanding, having experience doing this kind of like a startup on a simpler scale really does help, because there's just you're just if you do start something like this, you're going to be attacked by so many different problems and challenges, and it's important to know, to be able to take care of easy problems quickly, and at the same time focus, I think, on the really, really important things that you need to get done, because it's often very difficult to, you can get sidetracked very easily. And if you don't focus on sort of what your goals are and what you need to do to get to X milestone or X threshold to raise whatever money, I think you can get distracted very quickly, and having that focus. For me, I think I developed that through the previous businesses.
So again, maybe an unexpected answer, but actually for me it was going to graduate school, ironically enough, although I think that the things that I learned in graduate school might not be the only way to learn it. But let me highlight a few of those things for you. One is that learning how to work on a problem that's very unstructured is very useful. So being able to start with this idea that you have about maybe something will be better, and learning how to follow that idea and how to validate it and how to decide for yourself whether you're really onto something or whether it's something you need to throw away. I think that can be very valuable. Also, some of the other things like learning about how the whole funding process works, like getting people excited about what you're doing, and just in general learning how to work without a boss, because that's another thing that, you know, I don't know if these guys mention too much, but as a founder, you don't have a boss. So no one's going to be checking in with you. You're not going to have one-on-ones. You're not going to have meetings or any of this kind of structure and support. It's going to kind of be a walk through the woods, especially during the first year or two when you don't necessarily have a big team with you. You'll have some investor contact, which will be nice. You know, they'll keep you accountable for things at some level, but there's not going to be somebody that's breaking the tasks down and holding you accountable for things. So I do think it is important to establish some kind of a network with other people that can hold you accountable for stuff, but even kind of having the mental tenacity to survive a year or two when you're not working with anyone else day to day, you're probably working on something that people might even think is stupid or that it's wrong-headed. I think that's important, and that is something you learn doing research, actually.
Cool, thanks. So I want to make this a little bit more interactive, so I'll open it up for questions now. Just raise your hand if you have a question. I'll call on you. I can repeat the question.
Give us some controversy, too. Get some controversial questions.
All right, yeah.
So I just walked in, so I'm not sure if you guys already talked about this. But one thing, like what I want to do after school, and maybe after a couple of years, is to open up like my own data management consulting firm and kind of provide data management solutions. But for that, I feel like most of my clients would be other companies, so I'll be more of an enterprise. In that regard, do you think I would need, do I need to attend graduate school, or do I need a master's degree to have credibility?
So the question is, should I go to graduate school in order to have credibility?
Probably not.
Yeah, I mean, I think in my land, or at least what I've seen so far, you know, having a college or graduate school badge, I suppose it helps a little bit if you're in the earliest stage, but ultimately the domain expertise and your product and your results will speak for themselves. And I mean, I don't think anyone cares beyond that. They're paying you for your service, not for your education.
I mean, I think maybe the getting introductions and getting customers for a business like that, you know, is a prime reason to pick good investors. You know, having the right VCs will help you a lot in this. They'll help with the introductions. They'll introduce you to the right people. They'll help you get other companies excited about using your technology. Like that is definitely what the role of a lot of investors play, especially the very early investors in that case.
So graduate school is incredible.
Let me say some things. So I think if you do this, and in case anyone didn't hear, the question was about what he should do. And I think you're going to face two hard problems. Okay, the first hard problem is going to be that you need to get clients from somewhere. Okay, so you need to come up with some kind of a, you know, at least have some kind of an idea in your head of where those are going to come from. And sometimes those come from industry connections that people know. Other times it comes from just meeting people, you know, in your personal life. Other times it can actually come through your family, you know, or other people that maybe your parents have worked with, relatives, you know, whatever. You're going to need to figure out a way to do that. And ultimately, being credible with your clients is very idiosyncratic to the particular client. For some people, they want a lot of industry expertise. For some people, they want the nice PowerPoint deck. For other people, you know, if you have a really great portfolio, you'll be able to do it. For other people, they actually want you to have a PhD. It depends a lot on the client, especially in like government, that kind of stuff. Although I don't know if you want to work for those guys. The second hard problem that you're going to have to solve is you need to get other people to work for you. And this is tough for consulting companies because you're always going to have the question of, oh, okay, well, maybe if I go to a product company or something else, it'll be more fun. You know, I'll be able to have more direction over things, more control, you know, all of that. So I think ultimately, like, think about those two questions. You know, how do I get people to work for me? How do I find clients? And follow whatever you think you need to do in order to figure out the answers for you to those two things.
Cool.
can I just ask a quick question? So are you guys all three technical guys? Do you code?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, so I don't. So my answers might be a little bit different. So we'll see if that makes any interesting stuff.
Yeah.
What do you think about certain incubator programs that ask for in exchange for a certain percentage of equity to be off the ground and running? For example, I participated in
It's me too, actually.
the accelerator program, and I can't really go into the details about what the terms are, but what they basically do is they guide you through the process of actually forming a startup, how the equity is run, all the benefits process and stuff, in exchange for a certain percentage of equity. But after you exit the program, that certain percentage of equity is still held on to by that accelerator program. And do you think it's worth it to go and help? I mean, if you don't have any prior experience in the startup industry, to participate in such a program in exchange for maybe giving up something in the long term.
Cool. So the question is, what's your opinion on incubators and accelerators, and do you think it's worth it?
You can go for some
Yeah, I'm in my sophomore year of incubators, and so I thought about this a lot. The first time around, I definitely had no idea what I was doing at all, and it was the most useful thing ever. It was just a couple developers like trying to build something, and I think I'm a disciple of Paul Graham, and the way that he says to think about this is the amount of equity you give up should be less than the increase in the likelihood of success that you're given by giving up that equity. Okay, so if you give up 5%, does your incubator give you greater, like an increase of more than 5% chance of your company being successful? And there's some debate whether or not that's true or not, but I mean definitely. I mean I think it's really like binary outcome in a way. I mean, if you're gonna have some little like exit, whatever, but I mean, if you become like an actual meaningful big company, the amount of equity here and there isn't gonna matter. Everybody's gonna be fine. So I think I personally will just take any chips in my favor for my company to be successful. If that requires me to spend some equity, that's fine. And I think incubators, also remember, incubators didn't exist before Y-Combinator at all. This whole thing like came around since like 2005 or 2006 or so. The whole model came from there. It's not about office space. That's one thing to keep in mind. Like office space seems to be a lot of things incubators offer, and it has nothing to do with your success. It's actually about getting your product off the ground and helping you launch the company. And getting into that next round of funding also is often what it's about. But I'd say if you're in a position where you sort of know that you want to start a company and you think you have a good product idea and you have a team, but you just don't know the logistics of a startup, then definitely consider an incubator for that.
I'm going to offer an even more pro-incubator view, which is colored partially by the fact that my company went through two of them. So we, when we were starting out, we went through an incubator called the Brandery, which is based in Cincinnati. Very heavy focus on branding, and it's for consumer-oriented companies, and it helps you sort of put out a strong brand and brand identity and company identity, which I think is very important when your competitors are stuff like Hertz, which everybody knows of. And second, after that, I went through YC. So both programs very, very different. The Brandery does have office space, but I think one of the approaches the Brandery has is it's very much for first-time founders, for people who really, really don't have any kind of idea what they're doing, which was basically us, which is why it helped a lot. Everything from the legal formation of the company to how equity investing works, to how you need to go about fundraising, and just sort of those basic mechanics of running the company, well worth the 6%, and I think I'm allowed to say this, 6% that we gave up there. After that, the company was sort of at a stage. We moved to San Francisco from Cincinnati. We were almost ready to launch. We had our site was almost done, but yet because our business is one where you require money and infrastructure to launch, we needed some cash before launching. And since we didn't have any kind of users or revenue or product, no one wanted to give us money. So we applied to YC, got in, and I think that was the credibility that we needed to finish raising that money. So that in and of itself was very valuable. That was an additional 7%. But more than that, I think the power of YC is A, the credibility, but B, the network and the people that you can leverage there. Everybody that's involved with YC, super smart, serial entrepreneur in most cases. If you're facing a problem, chances are they've gone through it themselves. They've seen it happen 20 other times before with different companies. They know what the possible outcomes are. They know what you should probably do. They large network of investors they can connect you to, and I think that, for 7% again, for that, well worth it, especially if it's your first company.
Yeah, so Y-Combinator is probably the best incubator business formation program there is anywhere, I would say, and I can say that because I didn't go through it. So remember that they're talking about that. There's absolutely a long tail of incubators, though. There's like 1,000 of them in the United States or something, a huge amount. I went through AngelPad. AngelPad is a good incubator. It's San Francisco based. A lot of the founders came from AdWords and AdSense from Google. So there were some of the early people there, made some money that way. Some of them also were early investors in some of the YC companies, Heroku actually, a few others. But that was good for me. The good ones, I would say, are worth it. It's especially worth it, I'd say, if your company kind of fits their category of companies. And to give you a sense of what some of those categories are, I'm seeing like more vertical incubators now. So there's maybe like a food incubator, or a wine incubator, or hotel incubator, travel one. Brandery is kind of an example of this. I think they focus a lot on consumer stuff, right? Like even like food brands a bit, right?
Yeah, they play to the strengths of Cincinnati, which is, they have P&G based there.
Procter & Gamble, right,
yeah,
is based in Cincinnati.
Right, so.
Yeah, so there are more vertical ones. There are others that are really oriented on getting you funding. So if funding is something that you really need, then that would be a good match for you. I have heard of AngelHack. It's really great. It's a very good name in the Bay Area. So that's certainly worth something. But I think ultimately these guys are right as well. It's not about the office. It's very much about the network and the people that you meet. And it's interesting actually because for me, it's been 2 or 3 years since I went through AngelPad, and it was nice because when I got to San Francisco, I connected into this network, and it feels very much like an MBA class or something. It's a group of people that you continue to associate with for a very long time. Many of them are in very influential positions at companies, across the place. And these guys will tell you that some of your incubator classmates, you can ask them for anything, and they will help you. It's pretty incredible, actually.
Great, thanks.
Just a quick follow-up. When you said the good incubators, how would you tell whether or not an incubator is good or not?
It's hard, man. Because the simple naive answer is look at their exits that they've done so far, but it's not necessarily a good predictor. When the actual odds of a huge exit are very rare. So I don't know.
Your incubator's not going to make you successful either. Like your incubator is just going to help you get your company formed and like get introductions to investors. The rest is still on you. It's just not to be forgotten.
I would talk to the companies that have gone through it. I think that's going to provide more feedback than just looking at the numbers.
Yeah,
Great.
so just a little context. Databricks didn't come out of an incubator, formed right off the bat out of Berkeley. A number of friends that I've kind of watched go through YC in particular have very mixed experiences because of what they go in there to get. And you go in to get one thing, and you don't get enough exposure, but that's what you wanted. Then you're less happy than you would have been otherwise. So I think people have a variety of experiences, even at the good incubators, for example. So you got to make sure like you kind of know what you want out of it, and you go in and really try and get that thing.
Great, thanks. Yeah.
I don't know if you guys will have like a story for this, but can you think of a time where, you probably, like where you were just like, you did something, like you made a deal or you made a decision or something like that, and then a week later you were like, wow, that was really stupid, and then like how you might have recovered from that decision?
Cool. Yeah, so the question is, can you think of a time where you basically made a mistake and then had to recover from it?
Your mistakes.
I know there's.
I'm trying to think of a good one, a good controversial one.
Yeah, there's like 100 of them, but.
I was like, if there's any like funny story that
Well, I mean, I've certainly made wrong choices. We've made wrong choices as a company on the hiring front that we realized very, very fast, and the people were asked to leave very, very quickly, which is important because having the right people on the team is super, super important, and having the wrong person can pollute all the rest of the people. I'll let the rest of the guys talk. I'll try to come up with something.
Yeah, I mean, one kind of on that front, there, like, occasionally you get like friends or people that just like want to be involved with a startup in some way that like are willing to help out, and they might not even want to be paid. They just kind of want to be involved, That does not get pretty, or does not work out well, pretty much universally. I've tried this a couple times with friends where it's just like, oh, hey, you want to just help do random stuff? Okay, we have all this like random admin stuff or other things. And one time a friend was doing this and helped with just random, I don't know, it was like we were having a company party or something, and they helped set stuff up and whatever, it's great. And then like a month later, I get hit with a $2,000 bill for their hours. I'm like, what? I thought you were just helping me. I wouldn't have hired you if you had to pay you. but like, you're technically supposed to pay people, but that's not what they were doing. There was a misunderstanding, I guess. And my advice is just make sure there's no favors in startups, and there's actually good legal reasons to not treat things informally. Also, you get hit with a wage claim or something if you do it. So I don't know, maybe that's a good lesson learned, is keep it formal on the hiring front.
Yeah, I think one thing I would say too is certain decisions are reversible and others aren't. So for the decisions that are reversible, just make the decision and move on. An example of this is like what color you should make your homepage. Things like that. Things that are less reversible, firing somebody, they're going to be mad. They're probably not going to want to come back to your company. Things like funding rounds, stuff like that. So be sure that you're not just going back and forth on something that's easy to change and ultimately inconsequential, is what I would say.
Great, thanks. Yeah, in the back in the red. Cool. So the question is, can you talk a little bit about your experience with venture capital and maybe things that you learned by going through the process of raising funding?
I have a lot of thoughts on this one. So one, I think the biggest sort of humbling thing for me as an entrepreneur was to realize that the whole side of venture capital and capital in general in startups is not at all really about entrepreneurship. It's about being an aggressive allocation in a portfolio. And it's a little bit of a odd way to think about it, but VCs are like some Swiss pension funds, tiny little allocation for an aggressive investment that they dole down as LPs to VCs, and that ends up hitting us as entrepreneurs because we can provide a high risk, high return investment potentially to them. And when I got into entrepreneurship, I definitely looked at it as like, I'm gonna go change the world and blah, blah, blah. And investors don't think that way, really. They want to believe, but if we're going to change the world, hopefully it has a lot of value as well, and so your company's worth a lot. So it's just important to remember that, these deals are, it's a money thing at the end of the day. It's not like it's not a dream thing or anything. And angel investors are a little bit different. They're often typically a little more for the dream. But when you look at these big institutionals, you are an allocation in an aggressive portfolio when it boils down to it. So
I think this maybe merges with the previous question, which is something that you did that was like tremendously dumb. So when we were going to raise, we raised sort of three tranches of funding. The second one, the $5.6 million one, which was the first sort of VC money that we got. The idea was sort of like, let's look at who might be interested in investing. And so we found some company. There was one VC firm, I'm not going to name specific, it's very well known though, that had passed on an investment in Airbnb, and they had publicly said, the partner had publicly said, I wish I could sort of turn back the clock and invest in Airbnb. And we're like, okay, this is similar to Airbnb. Let's call them up. So we set up a meeting. We went in there, first VC meeting ever. And again, tremendously well-known VC. The fact that we even got the meeting is pretty miraculous, I think. And it was pretty much a disaster because our deck, our number, like there was an addition issue in the deck where the numbers didn't line up. And it was just the first meeting, and we had no idea what we were pitching. So, just overall advice: start with a low level, like a crappier investor first, so you learn what you're doing. Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the most interesting thing about VC behavior, though, is sort of the herd sheep mentality. So if your company is hot, everybody will try to invest, and it's going to be really easy. Raising money is really either really easy or really hard. And so if you're hot, if the numbers are great and people want to do the deal, if you get one offer, you'll get a ton of other offers. If you get no offers, no one will want to give you the offer because everybody thinks that somebody else knows something smart, and nobody wants to lose off that opportunity. So if they, if a VC firm knows that you're sort of, going, and they're thinking about investing, what pressure do they have to make an offer? None. They want to see, how else is XYZ firm going to react, or is anybody else going to make any offers? What if we're wrong about the company? What if our opinion isn't right? So that's why once you get the offer, then you call up all the previous, all the investors you talked to who are sort of just like chilling, and you're like, hey, I have an offer, a term sheet, and then they're like, oh my god, here's my term sheet, which is really unfortunate. And I think YC helps, and a really good accelerator helps provide momentum like that. We certainly got that out of Y-Combinator, but yeah, herd mentality, and it's unfortunate.
So I would say I'd be a little more charitable. Another way of looking at the herd mentality is by saying that people like to invest in themes. And this kind of makes sense macroeconomically because there'll be this consensus that emerges that maybe something that wasn't a good idea before is a good idea now, or due to some sort of a societal shift or a technical shift or something. Actually, understanding the sources of entrepreneurial opportunity is actually a very interesting topic. Won't go into it now, but it's all about change and like things are changing. Maybe people are going out to eat more or less, or they have different levels of education or moving around. So there's this consensus that will emerge in the VC community that right now, like, it's a good idea to invest in this sort of company or this class of company. So if you can slot yourself into one of those classes, it will be easier to fundraise. Is kind of the reality. It sucks, but it's just the truth. The other thing I would say is, I guess that's about it.
Great, thanks. Yeah, in the hat.
At least once a week.
Yeah, all the time. Yeah, all the time.
I mean, I think doing a startup is the ultimate roller coaster. I mean, you have one day where it's the best day, and everything you think is going amazingly, and the next day, I mean, it's like a disaster, and you just think it's all going to collapse. And that's why you just have to be really committed in order to have any chance of success at all. Story-wise, yeah, I mean, we've definitely had plenty of times. I mean, I can think of 10, 12 different decisions that we made where if we hadn't made the decision or hadn't had the outcome that we did, we would be dead. And just even this past fundraising round that we closed a month ago, I mean, we had a week and a half of money left in our bank account, something like $80,000. When we closed when the due diligence closed. I mean, it was that close.
A leak in the boat or something?
No, if you do an operations heavy business, the money just sort of leaves the bank account pretty fast.
Great.
One analogy I like to use, I use this with the team too, about why we have to keep costs low, is every time you raise a little bit of money, it's like you're an airplane that gets a little bit of lift, but then you steepen the angle of descent at the ground, okay? Because we're not making money yet. So it's just this thing. So if we raise more money, we'll probably actually steepen it more, which, it's like the faster you hit, the worse it is. And until you have lift, it's like you're flying an airplane at the ground. And that's literally what's happening on your, on your P&L. It's.
I mean, in the In the first 3 or 4 months of the company, we probably spent a total of $20,000. Yesterday and every day, we spend $30,000, just to give you an idea.
Yeah, that's a lot of money.
Cool. Any more questions? Yeah, and the Brian?
Yeah, so I'm currently working at a large Dilbert-esque company. For the benefit of me or any of the students here who might end up in that situation, what, if anything, can I take away from the experience that might help me if I want to join or start a startup?
Cool. So just quick recap. The question is, what can I learn from a larger company in case I want to work at a smaller company one day?
Great question. All the stuff that you have around like performance and like kind of HRE things and managers, they're a lot more like loosey-goosey as a startup, but they still exist in some way. And so understanding like what you hate about your current stuff is probably really good, so you don't impose that on others later, because you still need to do some of those things. Like you have to check in with people and you have to do it. And again, it's a lot more casual because you're an early stage startup, but like those basic sort of management HRE type things and all the HR stuff too, it's like, you have to recreate that as a startup in some way. Now, fortunately, there's nice tools and everything for that today, but all those things you can observe and figure out what you don't want to do, because you'll have to do something like that at a startup. And again, it can be more casual, but all the processy stuff essentially will need to be replicated at some point.
Yeah, so one thing, especially as a software startup, that so we're building software all day long. One thing that is really good to think about bringing over is some of the things that you really like about the products, and especially so like one thing we're going through right now is testing in QA, right? And some of the big companies are really good at testing in QA, maybe even to the extreme where it's painful to do testing in QA at them. Now, maybe you don't want to go that extreme when you come to a startup, but it's kind of good to understand like that kind of software engineering practice that you went through and be able to say, well, we're not going to go that far, but we'd like to have a little bit of that, and that amount of QA testing kind of infrastructure is a neat piece of kind of big company technology that's hard to sometimes replicate internally. And so, yeah, that's a very useful skill, for example.
Yeah, I'd like to add a bit too. You should turn to the gentleman on your left. You need to know how to sell to him. He's your buyer. So understanding how big companies buy technology actually can be pretty useful too. And it's pretty complicated actually, because at the company where I work now, it's called Criticism. We've started to engage with a lot of the Fortune 500, and understanding the whole decision-making process for like how software actually gets sold inside of a larger organization these guys are laughing because it's pretty complicated. You've got typically like some sort of a technical buyer that really wants it to work with the existing legacy stuff, and there's some sort of an ROI buyer that's really worried about whether they have the money in the budget and whether it's going to be a good investment for the business and all of this. And kind of understanding like how all the politics work on that is something that if you only work in a smaller organization, you're not going to get exposure to. I'm not saying that's something you should seek out, but it is something you can take from your job. The other thing too, and this is a little tongue-in-cheek, but think about what's broken. Because no company ever sets out to become a Dilbert-esque nightmare of a business. It's just the result of this slow aggregation of decisions that get made over a long period of time. So if you see something that you really don't like, if there's a process you don't like, something you don't like, think about all the little micro decisions that happened along the way that took the company down that trajectory, and think about how you can avoid those.
Cool. So, yeah, right there.
Okay, so I have two questions kind of related to what he said, and then back to what I asked earlier. First, to build credibility, like industry credibility, because I want to do more of like a solution implementation firm, would it be better to work for a firm like McKinsey or A.T. Kearney, where they have IT and tech implementation as as part of their consulting, or would it be better to work for a company like Databricks or Cloudera, where they're actually working on the technology, just to get that experience and that credibility?
So why don't I don't want to be mean, but why don't I ask this question, and you can ask it offline.
Ask us after.
Yeah, so yeah, right there in the blue. Cool, so the question is, how do you collect user feedback?
we get extremely tight user feedback. So we have a bunch of beta customers that are using the product every day, part of their day jobs. And when we started off, it was a really interesting process to see not only how they use it, but all the kinds of things that they want and the bugs that they run into. You can imagine, like, you know, it's not a public-facing product yet. We don't have millions of users. We have our beta customers. And so we actually have 4 deployed engineers that go to their offices once a week and meet with the guys that are working and watch them work. In some cases, they don't need hand-holding or any, like, you know, help, but we watch them and see what they do with the product, see what they type in, see what problems they've already run into and already figured out how to work around, even without our help. You'll run into customers that are kind of all over the place in terms of technical capability, right? You'll have people who have no clue what they're looking at, but are going to still put things into the box. You know, they're going to try their hardest to put things into whatever box you give them. And you know, they're customers too, right? And so you have to kind of watch and learn. Right now we get weekly. So all of the engineers that are working with customers do weekly checkups where we visit them and meet with them, talk with them. We're also, you know, we also get a lot of release-related feedback, emails in particular. We try not to let the emails and the feedback, you know, drive development. We definitely let it help us guide, you know, bug fixes to understand, you know, how to prioritize in that way. But they're not telling us what to build. Is kind of still the core piece of that.
Your answer to how do you get feedback? You're literally looking over their shoulder, going, what are you doing?
Yeah, I mean, we actually send people to their office. That's how we get feedback. We also get feedback in email. We also get, you know, we use a bunch of different chat solutions, HipChat, whatnot, that they can also do. But I think the most valuable one is actually sending people there and talking with them.
Yeah, I mean, we do email feedback to surveys, the whole gamut. Oftentimes, we also sort of just go and ride with people to and from the airport and act as a casual customer and chat with them about their experiences and what they are, you know, and not say that, you know, we're from FlightCar, we're executives in FlightCar, whatever, because that's how you get the most honest feedback, right? You know, people can sort of share and you can ask people questions and get some pretty honest feedback, but feedback is super important to what we do. Both positive and negative. You know, if we're doing something really well and people like one particular aspect of the product, we'll take a look and we'll try to see if we can capitalize on it and take it even further. And if people are having trouble with something, we'll figure out what needs to be done to fix it, or, you know, change the service or the way the service works accordingly. But yeah, user feedback is super, super important.
So having worked at 2 companies where the customer is quite different, it depends a lot on your business. So the place where I work now, we have like 1,000 paying customers, and they write big checks, you know, like 4 or 5 digits a month. At the other company where I was a founder, Wishery, we sold directly to small businesses. So we were charging like $9 or $10 a month. And in that kind of business, you can, you know, we had this very high volume sign up flow, and we used more like funnel analytics. You know, we were looking at things like what are our 14-day and 7-day active, how much retention do we have, how much activation are we getting, you know, that kind of stuff. I think it really does depend on how many customers you have and how you're going to make your roadmap. You should plan, though, if you're going to build a more consumer-y startup where you have a larger population of users, plan on investing a lot of your engineering time into metrics and analytics. I would love it if, you know, we could hear a little more from you guys on this one too, because I think that's something you probably do quite a bit.
Well, it's something we're starting. We're doing more and more, because I agree that we should be doing a lot of it and we're not doing enough. You know, just analytics on the user acquisition and the funnel side, and see where people are dropping off, and see, you know, where people aren't signing up. You know, do we need to put in, you know, more information here, restructure the nav here, do whatever on the website portion of it. You know, that's really important. But in the analytics, I mean, our business is driven a lot by, and this is a little bit tangential to feedback, but in terms of data, it's driven pretty heavily by data, because if you're running a hearse or rental car, right, you have 100 cars, and I can say, you know, I can have 100 reservations at the same time for the car, and it will work out. In my case, I don't know how many cars I'm going to have. So I have to sell reservations for cars and then hope that the cars show up. Otherwise, I have a little bit of a problem. And if I don't sell enough reservations and I have too many cars, then my parking lot is full and I have a problem. So, it's data is very, very, very important, and you can make really smart decisions with data. I don't think, that's why big data is growing as a segment, because businesses, I mean, you can look and try and see anecdotally and make a decision there, but that's not the way you should do it. If you can, use the data to make a informed decision, because the data provides the right answer.
Cool. And I think we have time for one more question, if someone has one. Yes.
First, I want to call out that the term acqui-hire has been around for like 2, maybe 3 years tops now, and I actually think it's a market timing thing. It's this combination of all these incubators like spinning out a bunch of startups and then extra capital being available for startups to get started, but then it means there's a lot more businesses that are not really able to get off the ground, and this whole acqui-hire, like early exit thing is a relatively new concept in the grand scheme of things. I mean, it's happened in the past, but like now it's kind of just like, oh, you kind of assume every acquisition is like an acqui-hire unless it has a B behind it, but I think any startup, you should definitely be thinking about it like a very long term, especially if you're going to step up to the plate and take investment and stuff. There are no investors that are really thinking short term at all, and that are doing that. And I think as an entrepreneur, if you're going to spend your time doing something, it might as well be something that is big. Definitely just think long term, and that's really the only position to come from, in my opinion.
All right, looks like everyone agrees. So if you could join me in giving our panelists a big hand. And thank you for coming.
Sit right down here and relax.